I need to introduce you to a new friend. Here she is. It was like sewing through a duvet. I was pushing it through the machine. Kind of sad that I don't get to knit it anymore. Maybe I'll have to make another one. This is what's happening as I knit with this. And it is super, super annoying. Welcome back to Shirty Deeds. My name's Jen. I like to talk about all things knitting and sewing. And today we're going to have another one of these catch-up chatty episodes where I'll talk to you about all sorts of things that I've been up to, sewing and knitting wise. And it's been a long time since we've had one of these. We've had Christmas, we've had New Year, which I spent working for the ambulance service. New Year's Eve night shift is interesting. And I've also had flu, which lasted a good 2 weeks, felt dreadful, and totally took out my birthday weekend as it was intended to be. I hit one of the big ones at the beginning of January. I turned 40. You can still see my cards up here. I'm not letting go yet. And we're actually going out for a nice dinner tonight to make up for the fact that the entirety of the birthday weekend got cancelled. So that'll be nice. In amongst all of that, I have been doing a fair bit of sewing, knitting, crafty things, and I'm going to talk about them today. So, welcome along. May I just say also at this point, thank you to all the new subscribers to the channel. I was truly amazed in the last one of these that I did that I'd got to nearly 500 subscribers. Now there are nearly 2,000 of you tuning in, which is nuts. I can't believe that you like to hear me waffling on about all this stuff, but apparently you do, and I'm really chuffed. So thank you. Hope you continue to watch and enjoy and find it interesting, inspiring or educational in some way. If you are new around here, I've been sewing almost as long as I can remember, since I was a kid, but really got into it about 5 years ago in a big way, and have since then made an almost completely handmade wardrobe, which I love, and I love that I don't have to go to shops anymore. So I'm probably quite an accomplished sewer. The knitting has only been around 2 or so years. I just wanted to add another craft that I could do on the sofa and got really into that as well. So not quite so proficient in the knitting, but we're doing okay. And I like to talk about both. First of all, I think we'll go through some sewing things that have happened. First thing that I got finished since I saw you last time was an interesting project, something completely new for me. And I made a carrot costume. Not for myself, but for a very good friend of ours. She is in the running club that my husband is also part of, and every Christmas they organise a big group run around the town where they all dress up, and they usually split into teams and each team picks a group costume that they're going to do. Last year they did a very hilarious group costume where they were all different kinds of Quality Street, and one of them was the Quality Street tin, you know, that the chocolates come in. This year they decided their team were going to be Christmas dinner, so they all dressed up as different elements of the traditional roast Christmas dinner, and my friend Chris decided she was going to be the carrot. So the first I heard about it was Chris sending me a message saying, I would really like to dress as a carrot for the Christmas run this year, and I found this picture as inspiration. I'm going to insert the picture here. This crazy, amazing, theatrical, pro-made costume. And I found this orange fabric that's really reasonably priced on Amazon. How much do you think I need to order? So at first I was like, oh, maybe like 4 meters, not really sure. Told her to get 6 meters to be on the safe side, and it's a good job I did, because we did need 6 meters. It was quite a narrow fabric. It was like a quilting cotton, I think. And then she started asking more questions about how on earth she would manage to make this thing. And I thought, I'm going to have to offer to help here, because she didn't have any real sewing experience. And she's a very good friend of mine, and I thought it might be fun to try and make a carrot costume. So I helped her out, and she came round. The most amusing thing about making this whole project was that when we were organising when we were going to do it, I sent her a message, said something along the lines of, yeah, come round 1 o'clock Friday, I've got that afternoon off work, it'll be fine, come round then. And she said, oh, brilliant, it's in the diary, I bet you didn't put it in your calendar as Operation Carrot. So of course I went into my calendar and changed the name to Operation Carrot, and that's what it became known as. And the finished result ended up hilarious and pretty good. Obviously, it is not a theatre style, amazing, pro-made costume, but I'm pretty chuffed with how it came out. She did tell me her initial idea for making it was to basically lie on the floor, have her partner draw around her to get the size right, and then just kind of sew it up into a tube, which I didn't think, it was just going to look like she was wearing an orange sheet and not a carrot. So I devised a bit of a plan of how we were going to do it, kind of took loads of measurements from her, and I decided that cutting a round or oval shaped portion to go round the shoulders with a hole in it for the head to go through would help to sort of give a 3D shape and give a bit of structure around the top. And then if I took some measurements and did a sort of modified triangular shape for the front section and the back section, those could then be sort of joined at the sides under the arms and create the carrot shape, but she'd still have loads of room for her legs to move and for her hips to move around while she was running. So the triangles, cut out 4 of each of those because they needed to be the inside and the outside, the sort of lining and the outside. And then once the triangles were sewn together and the most of the top section was sewn together, we stuffed it with like teddy bear stuffing that I think she'd managed to get off someone for free on Facebook Marketplace, something like that. And then sort of almost quilted lines into it to create a carroty effect. And once the stuffing was in there and I was doing all this quilting of all these pieces, it was like sewing through a duvet. I was pushing it through the machine. It wasn't the easiest thing. We were trying to do it quickly because we just wanted to get it all done in a day. Chris was really conscious that she didn't want me taking loads and loads of time over this costume that was going to be worn once. I didn't have much time, so we were just kind of powering through it. But I think it turned out pretty fun. They even went to the supermarket to pose with the real life food versions of the things that they were all dressed as. And she sent me pictures and I just thought it was hilarious and cute and fun. I think that she did get quite warm running in it. Thankfully it was quite a cold night, so she did have her duvet to keep her warm. But overall, good result. Pretty chuffed with that. Next thing I've got finished has been a kind of long project ongoing for quite a while. I have finished it, but to show you the final result of this, I need to introduce you to a new friend. Here she is. I was a very lucky girl for Christmas this year. My wonderful husband has known that I have wanted a dress form for years, since I got back into sewing in a really big way, and I could never really justify the money that would have to be spent. I wanted one that was all adjustable, that I could make my size so that it was really useful. And he's bought me like the whizziest, coolest dress form that is all fully adjustable at every point. You can adjust the body length, you can adjust how tall it is, you can adjust the shoulders and the neck measurement and everything like that. And it's even one of those ones that has sort of the top of the leg sections. So if you put the pole slightly off centre, there's 2 different ways that you can put the pole. you can put it so that it would go down one trouser leg, as it were, but it's got the little bum and leg section so that you can actually, it can help with fitting things like trousers and stuff, which he basically got me a really nice version of this, and I was so chuffed with it. I was really, really happy with that Christmas present. I'm a very, very lucky girl. And so far, it has been actually really useful. When I was finishing this project that's on it, this shacket, it was really useful to check that the hem was all level, to check the pocket placement, things like that. I've adjusted it, spent some time adjusting it all so that it is accurate to my measurements. So when I put things on it, they're pretty much how they're going to look when they're on me, which is great. Anybody that does this sort of thing by hanging things on clothes hangers knows that you don't get the width of the shoulders and the body going sort of front to back. So having a dress form, I think, is going to be really useful. I'm quite excited about having a go at things like draping and sort of drafting my own stuff and being able to use the dress form as guidance for how things are going to look, how things are going to drape and sit. So I'm really, really chuffed with it. But I feel like she needs a name. I have thought about something like clone because she's a clone of my body at this point. I've adjusted it all so it's my measurements. But if you've got any ideas of a name for her, please put them down in the comments below, because I feel like she's not part of the family until she's named. And I can't think what I want to call her. But anyway, she is wearing my shirt that became a shacket. I talked about this in the last episode when I was partway through this. She had yet to have her cuffs put on the sleeves and hadn't got the pockets on yet, hadn't got buttons or buttonholes, hadn't sewn the hem, but the main structure was there. I've now finished it, thank goodness, because I just kept dipping in and out of this and not finding time to really get into it and finish it, but I finished it this week and I think it's turned out really nice. The reason I'm calling it a shacket instead of a shirt is because this beautiful Robert Kaufman fabric, it's a brushed cotton, is so thick and luxurious and structured and gorgeous. It's like drapey but structured at the same time. It's really soft. Even after I pre-washed it, it came out the wash so soft and lovely, but it is thick enough that it gives some structure to things like the collar. And I do feel like rather than wearing this as a shirt that I might put a jumper over or a jacket over, this is more of a shacket. The nice dark grey colour is perhaps a bit boring, but I do wear quite a lot of grey. I wear a lot of black. And I think with something else, a different colour underneath, it's going to look interesting enough. I think it's going to be really useful because it's that neutral colour. And I really love it. I think it turned out super nice. So I'm excited about starting to try different things in my wardrobe and style it up and see what I can make it look like with different things. I really pleased that when I did these buttons, hopefully you can see from there, I sewed, they're just plain black buttons, but I sewed them on with a sort of mid-green thread. Green is my favourite colour, goes with lots of things in my wardrobe. And someone in the comments when I was last talking about this thought it might be a quite nice detail to use a different coloured thread. I think they suggested red thread. And I did have a look and thought about doing that, but I thought actually green would kind of be a nice detail to match in with other things that I might wear this with. So I did it with a green top stitching thread. I just had like part of a reel left over from something else. And I thought that was a good use of the thread that I already had. I already had the black buttons. I think those finished it off nicely. I definitely needed the pockets on it, the two breast pockets at the front, because it would have just looked too plain and sort of uniform-like if it didn't have the extra detail of having the pockets on. But overall, pretty pleased with that. I think it's going to be really useful, and hopefully with it being such a beautiful quality fabric, it's going to last a really long time and wash really well. And at the moment I'm just admiring it on the dress form. Another success. Love a success. Okay, she can go over there again and we'll talk about the next thing that's going on. So, final sewing thing that is going on at the moment, I spoke about this in a previous episode, is a coat that I am making. I have started it now, we've got quite a good chunk through it. I'm making out of this rather gorgeous woven coat fabric, which I've had for years and years, and the intention was always to make a beautiful lined coat with it. I discussed when I was last sort of thinking about this project that this fabric, with it being quite a big threads in the weave, it has a bit of give and stretch to it because of how it's woven. It's quite loosely woven, and I thought it might lend itself better to a coatigan type thing, an unlined coatigan, rather than a fully lined coat. But then I also had the problem of the edges of the fabric when they're cut. You can see that it's starting there. I'm handling this really carefully to avoid fraying. This is one of the sleeve cuff pieces. When you cut it all out, particularly if you're cutting anything on an angle that's off grain, it really frays because the threads that make up the weave of the fabric are really thick and loosely woven. So it's a fray monster. And I was really concerned that I was just going to make this thing and it would all fall apart. And overlocking the edges, didn't want to go through the overlocker very well. So I think the plan was that I was going to sort of sew round, stay stitch all around each of the pieces of fabric to stabilise the edges of the fabric, sew it all together, and then bind all the interior of the seams of the coat to make an unlined coatigan thing. And then when I was sorting out my stash, my fabric stash, which you can see in the last video I put out, I'm doing a series of videos. I'm really trying to just sew things from my fabric stash this year, get that under control rather than buying new fabrics. But when I was going through, I discovered the lining fabric that I bought at the same time as this fabric when I first bought it with the intention of making a proper fully lined winter coat with it. And this lining fabric in this blue colour, which you can see goes, I thought it would be a really nice bright lining for the coat, goes really nicely. I discovered the lining fabric again and I thought, do you know, the intention for this fabric was always to make a proper coat with it. And I can't overlock the fabric. It's potentially going to be a bit hairy trying to stay stitch around all the pieces to stop them fraying. So maybe the coatigan idea wasn't going to work. And I thought, what am I going to actually use more? A coatigan, more casual thing that's a bit loose and is less structured because it's just the one layer of fabric. Am I going to wear that with many things in my wardrobe? And I decided I'd probably actually get more use out of a proper coat. So I've gone back to the original idea of making a proper coat. And when I first bought the fabric with this intention, I thought I was going to want to make it a really nice winter coat. Now, this fabric is made of synthetic materials. I do not buy things like wool, boiled wool, etc. One of the main reasons for that is because I'm a vegan, have been for many, many years, and I don't buy or use any animal products. Please don't hate me. It's been nearly a decade now. I'm well in. You won't convince me otherwise. But it does mean that for something like a coat, it limits my choices slightly on what fabrics I could buy because lots of them have wool in and I really don't want to be buying wool things. So this is made of synthetic fabric. It's quite nice and thick, but it's not going to be as warm as something like wool. So when I bought it, I had the intention of underlining the whole lot with something to create an extra layer and a bit more structure and make it warmer, because I wanted a nice warm coat. And I found some fusible interfacing that was actually listed where I ordered it from, I think it was Minerva, as having thermal properties. So I bought enough to line all the pieces of the original coat I was going to make, which was going to be the Oslo coat. Can't remember who that's by. I'll try and put some details up. That was the original coat that I was thinking of making, and wanted it to be really nice, thick, thermal, got this fusible underlining interfacing stuff. And I thought, actually, let's go back to the original plan, underline with this fusible interfacing all these pieces, and actually what will that then mean is it stabilizes the givey stretchy fabric, makes it more structured and solid, hopefully stops the fray monster happening at the edges of the fabric, and I might then be able to do it as the original plan of a fully lined coat. So that's what I'm doing, but I'm not using the Oslo coat pattern anymore. I've decided to do, as I spoke about before, the Petra coat by Style Arc, which is a bit more coatigany in that it's an unlined coat pattern. And then I loved the shape and the style lines and everything about the Petra coat so much that I decided that is the one that I want to make this fabric into. But of course it's unlined, so I'm going to have to do some thinking and figuring out to make it a lined coat. So first of all, to check that this would work, I decided to do some practice seams with the fabrics that I've got. I wanted to make sure that I could do the seams so that they didn't fray on the inside of the coat. For a fully lined coat, none of the seams are going to be visible on the inside, so they're not going to need a bound finish on them, which would then protect it from the fraying happening. But I needed to make sure that the fraying wasn't going to happen secretly inside the lining, and then one day the coat would all just fall apart and fray apart. And I quite like top stitching and the structure that gives to seams, and I quite like that look on a coat. So I had a little practice sewing my seam and then putting the entire seam allowance over to one side and top stitching through from the right side, thinking that the seam stitching line plus the top stitching was going to keep that fraying in check on the back and make it less likely to start fraying everywhere. And I think that has worked. It feels like a really solid seam. It looks really tidy. Another reason for wanting to top stitch all the different seams in this is that being a polyester synthetic type fabric, it just doesn't press. It doesn't stay where you press. I've had this fabric years and years in the fabric cupboard and it's not got a single crease in it because it just doesn't take a press and doesn't stay where you want it to. So I thought if I top stitch down all of the seam allowances over to one side of each seam, not only will it look nice and neat from the front, but it's going to create a flatter finish because I'm not going to be able to press the seams like you would with wool, like with a clapper or something. And I think that's worked pretty well. I was pretty chuffed with that, and I thought, yeah, that's going to work. That means that I don't have to overlock the edges, which this fabric did not like going through the overlocker. It ended up puckered and horrible and gross looking. But I can just top stitch them instead. And I thought I'd better have a go because where the lining meets the facings of this coat, I'm going to have a join between the lining fabric and the main fabric. I better have a go at top stitching, sewing and top stitching that to see if I can get a good seam going on. The lining fabric again is a polyester. I think this was listed as something like what's the word? It's like a static resistant lining. So obviously with a polyester type lining fabric, you're going to get loads of static when you're taking the coat on and off. And I would just be building up electricity inside there. So the static resistant fabric, I don't know how they make it static resistant, but that's what it's listed as, also doesn't take a press very well. So top stitching the seam allowance over to one side for a nice neat finish is going to be the way to get around that. So I've now cut out all the pieces for the coat. The coat itself, the pattern, has a facing portion that goes on the inside of the neckline and then on the inside of the front of the coat, but because it's got the lapels that open, those facings need to be the exterior fabric, obviously, to match the rest of the coat. I spent quite a lot of time trying to work out exactly where the lines of the check were going, so that at least on the front it will be, each side will be in line with each other, so that I'm not sort of, the pattern matching's off and the checks are all over the place. I wanted it to at least be sort of tidy in that way. So I cut out all of those, spent loads of time figuring out exactly where to place the pattern pieces, and I cut them all out on the flat because the givey stretchiness of the fabric, I didn't want to fold it over, cut out pieces, and then the fabric sort of shifted on the underside, and then the checks, the lines of the checks wouldn't be straight. So I did it all really carefully on the flat, including the pieces that you're supposed to cut on the fold. I cut round half of it first, flipped the pattern piece over, cut round the next half to make sure that it was all straight. So I spent quite a lot of time doing the cutting, but I thought for a nice proper coat that's a big project, it was going to be worth doing that properly. So I did all of that. And then for the lining pieces, I cut out basically just all the exterior parts of the coat, but in the lining fabric, which was the front sections, the back two sections, it's in two sections, the top and the bottom bit of the back, the sleeves, and then figured out I was going to have to take some of that lining away because it would be meeting the facing on the inside, so you don't need as much lining fabric because it only goes as far as the facing on the inside. So worked out how to do that, added seam allowances to those parts, and I'm just going to do the lining and the facings as the inside, the exterior as the outside, and then put it all together. I don't know whether I'm going to do a bagging out sort of method because the coat pattern does have these kind of split seams below the pockets at the side seams. And I think that might make it a bit difficult to do a fully bagged out method, but I'm just figuring it out as I go along. I think I've got enough sewing experience now, and I have actually lined coats that didn't have a lining in the pattern before. So I feel fairly confident that I can get it right and it'll turn out a really nice, structured, lovely coat. Hopefully the pieces are not now too structured with the thermal underlining stuff. But just to give you an idea of where we're at the moment with the sewing bits that I've done, I've got this back section here, which is the starts of the back. You can see that the back comes in two portions, the top section, the bottom section, and I haven't finished the seams or done my top stitching on that yet because I need to try and press it a little bit. This is the lining, and then that portion there is the back neck facing. And it's actually, that curve was quite difficult to put in there. Obviously in the unlined version of the coat you would just be finishing that edge with some sort of binding or overlocking for the inside of the coat, but because I'm putting a lining in, I had to cut the lining to fit that and then sew it together. It looks a bit puckered at the moment because I haven't even pressed it or clipped the seams or anything. I might, because it actually looks like it's turning out quite flat. I might not clip the seams of the lining fabric or the main fabric because of the fraying problem. The lining frays almost as much as the main fabric does. But I think I could probably get away with just pressing that as well as I can, top stitching round like I did in my practice version, and I'll get a nice smooth result hopefully with that. So I've got pieces like this. And then I've got, this is front section where the facing meets the lining. Again, I'm just going to top stitch that down so it stays nice and flat. And you'll see from this front section, this is going to be, it will essentially lay like this, and the facing part will create that nice lapel that's open when you're wearing it. I think I think you can sort of put buttons further up so that you can have it all sort of closed up as well, but I'll probably most likely be wearing it with it open, so that'll come across like that. And you'll see on the back the thermal fusible interfacing underlining stuff that I've fused to all these pieces, and I have to say it is so far, it took a long time to fuse all these pieces because a coat is a lot of fabric, and I fused it to the back of every single piece. So far it seems to be keeping the fray monster at bay at the edges, not completely, but much better than it was when it's just the fabric, so I think that was a good move. And I'm really excited about this now. I'm excited that I'm finally, after years and years of having the fabric, making a proper lined coat out of it. It's quite a big project. I've been working on this for several days already. I mean, just the cutting out of all the pieces, the lining pieces, the interfacing pieces, all of that. That took best part of a day just to do all the cutting, and my hands were sore. The main fabric did not like my rotary cutter, so I had to do most of it with my shears, my scissors. I think it's going really well. I'm really excited to see it finished, and hopefully by the next one of these you might be seeing a finished coat on my lovely new mannequin, or maybe even on me. So that's where we're at with that. That's all the sewing things that are going on at the moment. I tend not to have several projects on the go at once, so the main focus is the coat. Really excited to get that finished. Hoping tomorrow I might be able to work on that a little bit more. I've also been doing quite a bit of knitting. Not on lots and lots of different projects, but there's been a couple of things that I've been working on. Last time we did one of these, I showed you this jumper, which is the lovely textured yoke jumper, which I thought was cables but isn't cables. And I literally just finished the yoke section and split for sleeves the last time we were here. Now knit the whole body of it, and I'm really pleased with it. The body section has come out. It has got a bit of ease, but not a lot. The lady in the pattern pictures looks like it's quite loose around her torso under the yoke section. Being a more pear-shaped person, I'm bigger at my waist and hips than I am around the top. I didn't take into account that the model was probably more in proportion than me and doesn't have big wide hips to get things over. So it's turned out the ease doesn't look the same as the rest of it now that I've knit up the body, but I actually still like the fit of it, so I'm okay with it. It does have a few decreases on the way down the torso, so actually if I just omitted the decreases and just had it going straight down the sides as I knitted around, that would have mitigated some of that problem, but I still feel like it wouldn't have as much ease as the original sample photos. But actually I still like it, so I think that's okay. I would really like to get some sleeves on this. Got to the point where we're about to start on each sleeve. I think I've been putting it off a little bit because I've been knitting on something else, and I also really hate knitting sleeves because I've got really long arms and it takes forever to get to the end of the sleeves. But I need to get on with it because I'd really like to actually get this finished before the end of the winter so I can wear it a bit. It's made out of bulky weight yarn, so it's going to be really thick and warm, and far too warm to be wearing in spring or summer for sure. So I need to try and get this done so I can actually get a bit of wear out of it before the winter. Otherwise it's going to be next December before I get to actually show it off and wear it. But there has been some progress. So that's a bit of a win. Now the reason that I haven't made more progress on this and actually finished the sleeves is because I have been mainly, almost exclusively recently knitting on the sofa blanket, which I know you all love, and I love it, and I still love it just as much as I did when I started it. And I've actually now very, very nearly finished it. Look how thick and big and chunky this thing is. Isn't it just luscious? I think it is. It feels gorgeous. The texture feels gorgeous. Everything I loved about it, I still love about it. And I have actually cast this off a couple of days ago. As I was nearing getting to the point of casting off, I'd nearly finished this, I started getting quite sad about the fact that I wasn't going to be knitting it anymore, because I've really, really enjoyed it. There was something really meditative about doing it. The pattern, the mosaic colourwork pattern, by about halfway through, I had got used to the pattern and how to put it together, that to the point that I didn't need the instructions anymore. So I was able to just sit in front of the TV and keep knitting away on this and chipping away at it every night. And it's all cast off. It's basically finished. As I was doing the cast off, I almost felt like I wanted to shed a tear because it was over, because I've just enjoyed making it so much. It's been really joyful. I was so excited about the finished result, but I've realised actually so much of this was that I was enjoying the making process of it, and just in complete disbelief the whole time that I've managed to make this enormous, giant, gorgeous looking blanket all on my own. And I'm really, really proud of it, really chuffed with it. It's so warm and snuggly and squishy. And as usual, I've got to the point where I need to weave in all these ends, and I'm procrastinating over it wildly, because weaving in ends is not my favourite thing to do. Despite the fact that I'm a big sewer, hand sewing is not my favourite. Weaving in all these ends is going to be a real mission, because this thing is massive, and every time you change colour at the side, it means a few more ends to weave in. And we know from previous projects that I'm not very good at just getting on with that and getting it done. But last time I had this problem, I promised you all that by the time I did another episode of the Sew and Knit Cast, I would have all the ends woven in and done on the scarf that I was making. I'm going to do the same with this. By the time we next come back, this is going to be actually completely finished. I might even get some nice video or photos of it on the sofa where it was intended to be, looking all beautiful and making our lounge nicer than it is. So that is the main thing that I've been knitting on. We worked out previously that this was over 100 hours of knitting time. I think we can add several more hours for how long it's going to take to weave in all those ends. Huge project, big blanket. This is like the love of my making life right now. Kind of sad that I don't get to knit it anymore. Maybe I'll have to make another one. Maybe. We'll knit some other things first before we think about another huge blanket. It's been a really big mission. Other kind of knitting related things that I want to talk about. Just before Christmas, we decided we were going to have a little outing to Hobbycraft. For those of you not in the UK, Hobbycraft is, I suppose, the closest that you could get to something like Hobby Lobby or Joanne, I think it's called, fabric type place. They do all sorts of craft supplies for different types of crafts, paper crafts, painting. They do some fabrics there, although they're not always that nice. And they also have loads of different yarns for knitting and crochet. And we just went to have a bit of a look around, really. And while we were there, I spotted some yarn that one of the viewers of this channel actually recommended, because I'd said in a previous video that I mostly knit with acrylic yarn for winter items. And someone in the comments said, have you ever tried the Women's Institute branded yarns? And I said I hadn't, but actually I'd have a look into it, because she said they were really nice and soft, and she really enjoyed knitting with them. So I thought, oh, I'll look out for those. And I didn't know that Hobbycraft is where they stock them, but I discovered that when we went into the store. I found the Women's Institute acrylic yarns. Oh, there's a bit of my hair stuck in it there, look. I'm so professional. So professional at this YouTubing thing. There's bits of my hair everywhere. Yeah, the Women's Institute yarns. This is DK weight. DK is probably one of my favourite weights to knit with, and the garments that I have in DK weight I really like and wear quite a lot. And they had loads of different colours. You can tell I like this sort of petrol-y blue colour by what I'm wearing today, because I then bought some yarn in almost the same colour. I've got enough of this to make a nice jumper or cardigan. And I've no idea what I'm going to make with it. Perhaps try something with a bit of texture or cables or something, so that it's something new for me to try. But when I saw this yarn, having been recommended it, I had a little feel on the face, and it is really soft and nice. And it's got a slight fuzzy finish to it, slight halo, but not too much. So it's going to still look quite tidy, I think, in anything I knit it up to. So I got that. I also then, they had lots of different grey tones of it. Those of you who've been watching for a while will know this ongoing saga with the sensible grey jumper, which then became the boring grey jumper. And then became the sensible grey jumper again, because I thought, actually, I'm going to continue knitting on this. I have not knit any more on the sensible grey jumper since I last spoke about it, which is probably 2 months ago now. And it's just not been drawing me to it. I was enjoying knitting, particularly the blankets, so much that I just didn't really want to knit anything else. And I think I've realised the reason that I'm not working on the sensible grey jumper is not now because I've fallen out of love with the idea of the sensible grey jumper. I think I need a grey jumper in my life. As boring as it may seem, it's going to be a really useful wardrobe item. And you all convinced me it was going to be a useful wardrobe item. And I still really want one. But I've realised one of the reasons I'm not knitting it at the moment, and it's just been sat there, is because we're back to the cheap yarn that I think just feels not so nice. Not really enjoying the process of knitting it. I think the pattern I chose was good. I think the colour of the yarn is nice. All the things about this jumper are actually quite good, apart from the feel of the yarn. It's an acrylic yarn, which I usually quite like, but it is a particularly cheap one. And I just don't think it's going to result in the long-lasting, nice, beautiful, well-made item that I want it to. And the feel of it in my hands when I'm knitting on it is just not the same as some of the other things I've been working on, so I've been less drawn to do it. And if I'm not going to enjoy the process of knitting it, spending hours, many tens of hours making a project, for me it's just not worth it, because so much of it is about the process as well as the finished product. And with that one, I just don't think either are going to be the one. So I think we might be abandoning it again. But with that in mind, when I found this, what I think is going to be really nice Women's Institute branded yarn, which I do really like the feel of, I bought some in grey. There were several different tones of grey. I spent lots of time in the shop holding it up against me to see which one suited me, and my husband said this grey looked best on me. So I bought a jumper quantities worth of this, can't remember, 5 or 6 balls, something like that. And again, it's the DK weight one. And I'm going to make a sensible grey jumper out of this, but it's going to be the new improved sensible grey jumper with much nicer yarn. Not sure if I'm going to go for that same Stockholm sweater pattern, the petite knit one, but sensible grey jumper lives on in a new form, and that was the thought behind that. So a couple of jumpers worth of yarn there, and I'd sort of put them all in. I had to go to the front of the store, get a basket. I didn't know I was going to buy anything on this trip. I just wanted to go and see what they had. I ended up buying 2 jumper worths of this yarn in 2 different colours. And then, despite having all that in my basket that I went and grabbed, we were wandering around seeing what else they had, and there was a whole section of different cotton yarns, and I really wanted to try some cotton yarns. I have got some in stash that are waiting for a project to emerge. but I really wanted to try some natural fibres and cottons and things. So we went into that section, and straight away my husband picked out this one, saying something made out of that would really suit you and it would be really cool and it would go with lots of things in your wardrobe. And it's a Wool and the Gang one. I've never used any Wool and the Gang yarns before. And it's the Shiny Happy Cotton. It is definitely not shiny. It's not a mercurized cotton. It's just a regular cotton, 100% cotton it says, made in Peru. And this is in the colourway TV Static, which totally makes sense given that it looks like the old style TV Static with the white and black mixed in. I think it's really cool. It looks really cool in the ball. And I thought I'm going to have to do some swatching, see what I think of this. And this is officially the most expensive yarn I have ever bought. A whole jumper / cardigan quantity of this. I was working it all out in the store and I had to buy everything they had left on the shelf to get to a jumper or sweater quantity of it. The whole lot cost over £75 to get enough, which I don't think I've ever bought a jumper in a shop for £75, let alone bought £75 worth of craft materials for one item. But I thought maybe I might want to try something new, and I really fell in love with the yarn. I have done a little swatch of this. It's a swatch that's ongoing, actually, and I really like how the black and white colour come out in the stockinette stitch. I've just done a little short swatch, but I went for the needle size that it recommends on the ball band, which is, where does it say it? Here we go. 5mm needles. Let me just check I'm correct in saying that. Yes, 5mm needles I went for to create this swatch, and it's turned into a really loosely knitted fabric, which I don't love. It's too loose, it's not dense enough, it's not got enough structure, and particularly because I've heard that cotton grows a lot as you're wearing it and blocks out and stretches quite a lot because it doesn't have the snapback and the elasticity of other things. I'm a bit concerned if I did anything in it at that gauge, it would just be like a big floppy, gappy, holy, messy thing. It's just not right. So I'm going to continue knitting this swatch with progressively smaller needles going down until I get to the point where I'm happy with the gauge of the fabric and how the fabric feels. Then I'll measure it up for what the actual gauge works out at, how many stitches per 10 centimetres, and then try and decide on a pattern to make with this. I don't know whether it's going to be a cardigan or a jumper. I'm aware that making something out of cotton is better if it's a seamed item, or at least has like faux or false seams built into the design, because if you knit in the round with cotton, you're just going to end up with an item that grows loads. It needs the stability of seams in there, I believe, to stop that happening quite so much, so you end up with a nice wearable garment at the end of it. And all of the jumpers, sweaters, things that I've made have all been kind of in the round from the top down for the most part. So doing so, like a seamed thing might be a new thing to try, and I quite like the idea of having a go at that, but I need to get the gauge right and then figure out what patterns I could use that might fit that and work for it well. So I have, in the process of making my swatch with this, discovered that there is a problem when I'm knitting it. You know that thing that happens when a thread or a yarn or even your hair or something gets twisted round on itself and twisted round on itself and over twisted and over tight, and eventually this happens. This is what's happening as I knit with this, and it is super, super annoying. I have spent even with this tiny little swatch, quite a lot of the time as I'm swatching with this, having to turn the ball round like this or turn the swatch round to untwist the yarn as I'm knitting it, because something about this yarn or the way that I'm knitting with it is making that over twisting happen constantly. It happens on the knit rows, it happens on the purl rows. I don't know whether it's because the yarn is cotton and it's slippery. I don't know whether, I don't think it's something to do with the way round that the twist goes, because I've compared it to other yarns that I've used recently that have been absolutely fine, and the twist is going the same way. I know that some yarns can twist different ways and that can cause issues like this. So, and I also wonder whether it's not something to do with the way that I'm knitting it, because I'm knitting with this the same way that I knit with anything else, and it's doing this twisting thing, and I've never had this problem before. Now I'm a bit gutted because this yarn was really expensive, for me anyway. It's more than I usually would spend on something to knit with. And you sort of expect it when you pay more money to be this kind of brilliant, perfect thing, and it's going to make something so glorious and wonderful. And now I'm discovering that knitting with it is really annoying. I don't find the knitting with cotton part of it annoying. I know that it has less stretch, but that doesn't seem to have hurt my hands or be difficult in any way. It felt easy to knit with. It was just doing this annoying twisting thing, and I kept having to untwist the ball again. So I wonder if anybody that is a more experienced knitter than me can tell me why this might be happening. My tension is generally pretty good when I'm knitting. You can see from the body of the sweater that I was showing you that this is unblocked, and the tension of my stitches, the evenness of the stitches, I think is pretty good. I've never really had a problem with that. But for some reason, with this yarn, I'm getting the twist monster happening, and I want to figure out why so I can fix it, so that whatever I make out of this, whatever jumper or cardigan or whatever it is that I make out of this yarn, isn't a complete trial from start to finish that I'm not enjoying making. I want to enjoy making something from it. Maybe it's because it's slippery. Maybe some quality of the yarn is changing subtly how I'm knitting, so I feel like I'm knitting the same way, but perhaps I'm not. Maybe the yarn is just too loosely twisted or something, or there's something about this particular yarn. Can somebody tell me? Has anybody used the Wool and the Gang Shiny Happy Cotton before and had this problem? Is it just this yarn? Is it all cotton yarns? Is it all natural fibre yarns that aren't something like wool? Answers on a postcard, please. Or, in the modern way, put it down in the comments. You're usually so helpful down there. I'm hoping you can help me with this one. And if we can solve it, then I'm going to be able to make something really nice out of this that will be really cool looking. And fingers crossed for that. So I think that is all of the sewing and knitting projects that I've either got on the go or are nearly finished or are on the way at the moment. And all the things that I've been acquiring and buying recently. So it's time to say goodbye. Say goodbye to my as yet unnamed new friend, my clone of my body, the dress form. Again, any ideas for a name? Because she needs one. Stick it down in the comments. If you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel and you feel like hearing a bit more of me waffling on about all this stuff, then please do think about hitting the subscribe button and the bell so you get notified whenever I've got a new video out. And hit the like on the video, because apparently YouTube really likes it when you do that. And I really appreciate it, because I know I'm not wasting my time doing this and putting the effort into all these videos. But I'll leave it there for today. Please enjoy all of your own sewing, knitting, creating and crafting. And I will see you next time.